when a refusal was not bound to the execution boundary. A reading of frontier model safety evaluations through the execution boundary. When a frontier model is evaluated on dangerous capabilities, its willingness to assist with an attack, for instance, the headline result is usually a refusal rate. The model was asked to do something it should not, and it declined. The evaluation records how often. That number matters. On its own, it answers a narrower question than it appears to. The important point is not the identity of one lab, one benchmark, or one model. The pattern appears across frontier model evaluations whenever safety is measured mainly at the response layer. The model is asked for dangerous assistance, the model refuses, and the refusal is counted as evidence that the dangerous path was closed. But in an agentic system, the path is not closed merely because one response said no. What a refusal rate actually measures. A refusal is an output layer event. At a particular turn, given a particular prompt, the model produced a no instead of the harmful content. That is a real and useful property. It is not, by itself, governance of the action. Governance is about whether the refusal is bound to the boundary where the action could actually open. A single response refusal is not bound to anything downstream. The same underlying capability can often still be reached through a different route, a downstream step, tool state, artifact, or workflow that preserves enough state for the same action path to remain reachable. So the question that separates a refusal from governance is not, did the model say no? It is, did that no travel to every place the action could open? The reading everyone reaches for. The usual interpretation of a model evaluation is binary: the safety policy worked, or it did not. The refusal rate rose, or it fell. Improvements are read as the model getting safer, failures as the model needing better alignment. That framing keeps the entire question at the response layer, the one place a refusal is easy to observe. It treats the model's output as the boundary. But in any system where the output is not the end of the line, where outputs become inputs to tools, chains, agents, and downstream systems, the response layer is not the boundary. It is the first of many. The execution boundary reading. The deeper failure mode is not a model that refuses too little. It is a refusal state that stops at the response and does not propagate to the execution path. Consider where a refusal would need to hold to count as governance: at the moment a tool is invoked, at the moment a chain step assembles a result, at the moment an artifact is used, at the moment a workflow attempts to act. A refusal that exists only as a sentence in a single reply governs none of these. The action it declined can still become reachable through a route the refusal never touched. This is why the model refused and the action was governed are different claims. The first is about an output. The second is about a boundary, and the boundary is wherever the action actually opens into consequence, which is increasingly not the chat response at all, but a tool call, a downstream system, or the next step in an agent's plan. For a security-capable model in particular, this gap is the one that matters. An evaluation can show a high refusal rate at the response layer while the execution surface around it, the tools, chains, and artifacts the model can still set in motion, remains ungoverned. Why this sharpens with agents? A single-turn assistant makes the gap easy to miss, because the output more or less is the action. An agent removes that comfort. Agents chain steps, call tools, produce intermediate artifacts, and act on systems. A refusal at step 1 does not bind step 5. The execution surface is the whole chain, not any single response within it, and a refusal that lives only at the response layer governs a vanishingly small part of that surface. So the question worth asking alongside the refusal rate is structural: when this model declines, does the decline bind the downstream path, or does it end at the sentence? The shift this case points toward. The governance question evaluations have been answering is whether the model complied with the safety policy. The question they will increasingly need to answer is whether the refusal remained bound as the request moved toward execution. Should this action path be allowed to open under the current authority, state, and conditions, regardless of how a single earlier response was phrased? A refusal that lives only at the response layer is not yet governance. Refusal must travel with the execution path, not remain a model output event. This is the boundary I work on through foresight oversight, not whether a given output should be allowed, but whether an action should be allowed to open under the current authority, current state, and current conditions. The next generation of model safety will not be measured only by what models refuse to say. It will be measured by whether the refused path is prevented from opening at all. FO Lens, Cases 01. Read the full essay at writing.luralane.com.